So Reverend Turner has just led us in the reading where it spoke about the Bodhi mind. So that's a subject that's going to come up in what I will say to you today. And my topic is, what is your aspiration? That's the question I would ask you to think about. The tradition represented at this temple is Shin Buddhism. It is the Dharma path identified 800 years ago in Japan by Shinran, the person depicted in the image on the right side altar behind me here, Shinran. And on his Dharma path, the sole focus is awakening our spiritual aspiration. In this regard, his path is unlike most other forms of Buddhism. What does it mean to awaken our aspiration? Let's give some thought to that. Generally speaking, an aspiration is a strong desire or longing to achieve something, coupled with a willingness to work hard to fulfill that desire. An aspiration is not a transient wish or inclination, something that we take up one day and abandon the next. Maybe I'll finish that bag of potato chips. That's a momentary impulse, not an aspiration. I would guess that you have bigger hopes and dreams than your afternoon snack. Again, our question for today, what is your aspiration? First, think about aspirations that do not have any religious or spiritual content, what we would call worldly aspirations. Familiar examples are to graduate from high school, to gain college admission, to meet the right person, to run a marathon, to have a rewarding career, to own a home, to reach retirement. Older people in the audience have realized some of these aspirations. If you are a young person, the realization may be mostly in the future. I think we must have worldly or secular aspirations because they help to set a direction for our lives. Without such hopes and dreams, wouldn't our lives be aimless? If we had nothing in the world to aspire for, then we would struggle in finding a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Worldly aspirations are generally aimed at future achievements, such as earning a college degree, becoming financially independent, and so on. Dreams that we hope will come true someday. We may even have worldly aspirations that will not be realized until after we die. How is that, you may ask? As the older attendees know, a list of posthumous aspirations is called an estate plan. The aspirations I've mentioned so far are worldly. They lack a religious or spiritual dimension. They do not point to matters of ultimate concern for human beings. Matters of ultimate concern are what defines the spiritual dimension. Some of us are capable of fulfilling our lives through worldly accomplishments alone. However, others of us cannot find fulfillment that way. We feel compelled to ask questions such as, what am I? What are birth and death? Why is my life bound up with sorrow? If we are asking such questions, it's likely that we have begun to feel uneasy about our life as a whole. The inescapable feeling that something is not right about our life is our gateway to the spiritual dimension. Remember the story of Siddhartha Gautama, who became the historical Buddha. It was this feeling that something was not right about his life that led Siddhartha to doubt his worldly aspirations. His dissatisfaction reached the point that he chose to abandon his home and family and to become a mendicant, a truth seeker. Siddhartha awakened a spiritual aspiration. If the questions that troubled Siddhartha never arise for us, if there is no spiritual aspiration, then we may have no need for Buddhism. Its teachings do not pertain to us. In that case, if we expect to fulfill our lives at all, then we had better focus on our worldly aspirations. For most of my adult life, I figured on living out my days in that manner, seeking after worldly fulfillment. But 16 years ago, my thinking changed when I first encountered Buddhist teachers and teachings here at the temple. For me, it was the beginning of a spiritual aspiration, something I did not know I had. Think about why you came to the service here this morning. If you came of your own volition, the fact of being here is evidence that your aspirations are not purely secular. It seems there is a spiritual component in there, even if it's hard to put into words. As I stated at the outset, awakening our spiritual aspiration is the sole focus on Shinran's Dharma path. Wait a minute, you say, could that really be true? Only our initial step on the path is important? Not what comes after? Well, most other forms of Buddhism have a different focus. There, the focus is not so much on our initial step as on the subsequent steps of practice and attainment, things that we ought to do and ought to achieve. In those forms of Buddhism, the initial step of awakening aspiration is taken to be a given, that which precedes any discussion of the main issue, namely performing practices. But Shinran returns the Dharma path to its starting point and directs all of our questioning there. For him, the key question was always this: can I know whether my spiritual aspiration is true and real, to use Shinran's terms? Have I realized the right starting point? If I have not, then all my subsequent steps will be misdirected. If, however, my aspiration is true and real, then everything else follows necessarily, he says. The aspiration contains all that is needed as far as practice and attainment. Rather than aspiring to attain something off in the future, the Dharma path is aspiring to seek the way here and now. It is nothing but endlessly deepening our initial aspiration. By meeting people who embody that way of life, we have a chance to awaken our own aspiration, which is what took place for me. Here's a term that I hope you will learn. It was in our reading that preceded my talk. The Bodhi mind, or in Japanese, Bodai Shin. You may know of Bodhi Day, which commemorates the Buddha's awakening. And you have heard of the Bodhi tree, under which he sat in meditation. In Buddhism, our spiritual aspiration is called the Bodhi mind. It is taken to be the starting point of the Dharma path. Now, very likely, you have chanted the words Bodai Shin many, many times. We did so this morning. You remember, Ganni shi kudoku byodo se isai do hotsu bodai shin ojo an raku koku. Do hotsu bodai shin. The words mean, may we together awaken the Bodhi mind. Every time we chant, it's what we say we are going to do. But can we awaken the Bodhi mind? Consider Shinran's response to that question. I may think that these times belong to the right Dharma age, but in me, the lowest of foolish beings, there is no thought that is pure or true and real. How could I awaken the Bodhi mind? And this is written by someone who spent 20 years as a monk. Here, Shinran is questioning an assumption that was basic to all the forms of institutional Buddhism that existed in his day. It's an assumption that he took as a given during his years as a monk on Mount Hiei. He assumed that he had good spiritual potential and that he had already awakened the Bodhi mind. But eventually, he was forced to conclude otherwise. While on the mountain, Shinran's efforts toward practice and attainment were misdirected because he had not encountered the right starting point. When he recognized the falsity of his assumptions, he abandoned the monastery and he became a student of Honen. It took Shinran 4 years of listening to Honen for a true and real spiritual aspiration to awaken in him. Here is how he describes the process that brought it about. Shakyamuni Buddha and Amida Buddha, our compassionate spiritual parents, through a variety of good and skillful means, bring us to realize unsurpassed Shinjin. Shinjin is a word that corresponds to the true and real spiritual aspiration, the right starting point of the path. As stated here, Shinjin is not self-generated, like the Bodhi mind taught on Mount Hiei. For the arising of Shinjin, it's necessary for the right external conditions to be present. The external conditions are the variety of good and skillful means provided by Shakyamuni and Amida, our spiritual parents. Shakyamuni represents all of our Buddhist teachers, those who lived long ago, like Shinran, and those we meet in person. Amida is a symbol that represents our spiritual aspiration. That's what you see in the center of the Naijin here, the statue of Amida. It stands for awakening aspiration, which, as I say, is the sole focus on Shinran's Dharma path. Shinran identifies 2 aspects of awakening a spiritual aspiration. He says that it is to give rise to something new for the first time, and it is to awaken what has existed from the past. The first aspect, to give rise to something new for the first time, has to do with our own unique and unrepeatable life. It has to do with self-awareness, with recognizing that our abilities are severely limited, that we cannot awaken the Bodhi mind by thinking we have good spiritual potential. Recognizing our limitations in this sense is self-awareness. The second aspect, to awaken what has existed from the past has to do with Dharma awareness. It means that our aspiration must contain a universal aspect, something that is not ours alone. It's something that is in common with all who have gone before us on the Dharma path. It means for us honoring teachers from the past, such as Shinran, and teachers from the present, the ones we meet in person. All of them are teaching us the meaning of Namo Amida Butsu. That is what our teachers are saying, and we are hearing, and we are coming to appreciate the meaning. They are using a variety of good and skillful means in helping us to awaken an aspiration that is true and real. We began today by considering worldly aspirations, the hopes and dreams that we must have in order to give a direction to our lives. A time may come, however, when we are led to question those aspirations. That is when the spiritual dimension opens in our life, just as it did for Siddhartha. Shinran is the one who questioned whether the Bodhi mind could be awakened in any of the forms of institutional Buddhism of his day. He identified a different aspiration, the one he calls true and real, which is not self-generated, and which he made the sole focus of his Dharma path. In today's adult study session, I hope that together we can explore this further. Thank you very much for listening. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman Dabutsu. Naman.